This video is all about practical workarounds for perspective if you don't really have a great grasp of being able to just create your own images on a blank piece of paper. I'm not going to be covering perspective basics like horizon line, 1, 2, and 3-point perspective in this video. Really, I wanted to focus on some very useful hacks that you can use in order to make your perspective better and more consistently easy to use. So we're going to go ahead and start with some very simple examples. When you're confronted with a script and it says, I want to see a city street, or I want to see an office, or really whatever it is that you need to be able to draw, it can be very difficult to imagine how to get that visualized into an empty panel. And so the traditional way of doing it, and really the way that I do it still, is to go ahead and start with a horizon line. And I'm thinking, this is going to be my city street, and I'm going to go with a 1-point perspective. It's the most simple perspective. I'm going to put my horizon line just about halfway up the panel right here. I'm going to draw through. And because I want to go with a 1-point perspective, I think I'm going to put my point directly in the middle, and I'm going to very quickly speed things up while I drop in my perspective. That's going to be my perspective looking directly into the panel, but I also need horizontal and vertical lines. And because I've already got that established, and I did that using the hashes on my page, it makes it very easy. And it's a reason why using comic pages with borders is very nice. If you don't have that, it's not really an issue. You just need to use a T-square. And so I'm going to go ahead, I'm using a parallel ruler. This is actually a mapping tool used for ship charting, but I just find it creates parallel lines very quickly and easily, more easily than any tool that I've been able to find. And I'm going to turn my page and do my verticals. I'm just going to line it up and throw these in very quickly. And so I'm going to go ahead and use a kneaded eraser and just lighten this down. If I leave it like this, I end up with so much pencil in the image, it can be difficult for me to decipher what I'm trying to draw on top of it. And so I've got a 1-point perspective. I want to be looking down the street. And so I'm going to start, I'm just going to draw a line here. I'm going very loose. And the advantage of working this way is that I can just quickly envision shapes in here. And so this is the front of the building. It's directly flat to us. Now I'm going to draw the side of the building. Because my perspective point is pretty close to this, I really want to avoid making my building really wide like this, because what I would end up with, really, if it were drawn from the top, this would be the front of the building here, and the side of my building would be outrageously long, and it always is much shorter. So what you're drawing is a building that's more like this, and in perspective that becomes very short. So there's the side of my building here. I'm going to draw in my sidewalk. I think I'll have that. It's going to be wider here because I can see more of it. This will be in perspective again, so it's very shortened. And that'll be the front of my sidewalk here. I'm just going to quickly sketch in. Building fronts, these are getting very small. I want to make sure also to not go all the way up to my horizon. My horizon isn't on the floor. And so if I do that, I'll end up with something that looks very odd. And because I've got everything established, it's really easy for me to go ahead and say, okay, I want a light post here. And I can just kind of envision it in that spot. I could put maybe a garbage can here, the kind of detail you see on a street. And I'm thinking, as I'm looking at this already, my sidewalk is a little bit narrow. So I'm going to bring in my building just a little bit more here. And I'm giving myself just a little bit more room on that sidewalk. So I can put maybe a person walking down the street. It's still a pretty narrow sidewalk. I might want to bring that out even just a little bit further. Let's just change that. And it's really easy because I'm working this way for me to make these kinds of changes quickly and easily. And so I'll bring my street light out just a little bit further. My garbage can, just different detail, I'm just throwing it in. My figure is going to be just about that big. And because my figure is about that big, I want the top of my floor to be just about that big. And so I've got the first floor for my buildings. The second floor, I'll put some windows up here. Maybe I can put an awning here, like this. Put a fire hydrant here. I can just throw in anything that seems like it would work in the scene. And now I'm going to draw, here's my street going across here. I'm going to draw the other side of the street, line it up across. I'm really loosely sketching. And here are some of my buildings going down the other side of the street. And across the street, Draw, and again, just really loosely sketching all this stuff in. I'm gonna draw some buildings sitting across the street. It's pretty far away, so I line that up, and that's about where it lines up. So I want the top of my first floor on the buildings on the other end of the street to be just about like this. And maybe I'll put detail on this side of the building, a nice big window, maybe for people to go in, that kind of thing. And there's a very, very simple street. I really should have something in the foreground though. So because my person is about that tall, I'm gonna want the top of a car, if I put a car in here, to be just about there. And I can just put the roof of a car really quickly in the foreground here. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna quickly tighten this up. And so all I need to do is just lighten this down again. And I'm gonna go ahead, because the car's in the foreground, I'm gonna go ahead and draw that first. And we're not referencing anything for this. I have so many kind of default things that I can draw just from experience. And so it's not going to be any particular type of a car, especially because it's just a roof. I don't really need to worry too much about making it very, very accurate. And I'm still going to go fairly loose here just so we can move on to the next step. Give it a windshield wiper. Maybe see inside the car just a little bit. Here's the dashboard. And so there's my car in the foreground. And so from there, I'm going to go ahead and start to draw in my building. I think I had started it just about here. I want to bring it in just a little bit. I have my first floor defined just about here. Got a fire hydrant here. So let's go ahead and draw that in. And I'll draw in my sidewalk. And obviously this is where reference can really help you out. I've got a doorway here. Put a door handle just about here. And you can see with how loose this is, unfortunately, because I'm trying to get across as much as I can, as quickly as I can, and I want you to watch me do it instead of just saying, okay, and here it is, all finished. To do this properly, it takes a certain amount of time and concentration. I'm going to draw coming around the corner here to the other side. I want this to be very thin in comparison. So just about like divisions in the sidewalk here. And I've got my awning. I think I'll curve it. Might look a little more interesting. There's going to be the other side of my building. Draw it. And now I'm following my perspective to this point here. And this is going to be the floor here. Give it maybe a bit of a doorway there. Side of my other building here. Oh, I also want some windows, and these are very, very narrow. There's one. Let's see if I can fit 3 windows in here. Really narrow. And I've got my street light just about here. Post office box beside it. Just some detail that you would see on a street. Some divisions in the sidewalk. I want these to be very narrow. Here's going to be all the way to the other side, to the end of the block. Maybe give it a sign here. Just give it something that comes out. Maybe another circular sign just below it. And I can quickly draw a figure. I want my figure to be in perspective, so it needs to be short enough to fit through a door here. So that figure is going to be just about that big back in here. Hands in his pockets. Here's the other side of my street, and it's going to be here. And I want that to basically line up here. These are further out from the perspective point, so they'll be just a little bit wider. So you'll see more of the front of the buildings. A bit of an indent for that door here. It's a little old-fashioned. The other side of my sidewalk is going to be, that's a little, and I can see that I'm off here. So I'm going to just lower the bottom of my buildings and cheat that. And some more things on the ground. Here's a garbage can, maybe some garbage that's kind of been built up for a few days. And then we have the other side of the street. This all gets very narrow here. That would be my sidewalk here. Draw the top of a building here. First floor is going to be way down here. It's much further away. And so I could have a couple of divisions for some windows here. Quickly get these drawn in here. And some more windows just up here. Make sure to line them up with the windows below. And I'm not going to continue from there. You can really see how very quickly you can get a scene established in here and draw anything really wherever you want. In our next example, I'm going to use a 2-point perspective, and we're going to draw somebody in an office sitting at a desk, and I'm going to use a horizon line that's just a little bit higher. And the reason I'm going to do that is I want to see the top of the desk. I don't want it to be too low and have that interfere with the top of the desk. So I'm going to start just about here. So I kind of want my desk, I'm envisioning it being something like this. And I'm just kind of sketching in. My person sitting behind the desk is going to be just about here. The desk seems a little short, make that just a little bit longer. I'm gonna have a wall here, a window behind them, garbage can, some different detail, some filing cabinets on the wall here. And I can just really quickly, without even using any perspective, kind of rough in just about where I want things. But now based on that, I'm looking at putting one point just about here. And that's gonna, let me put it just right there. And then my other point will be quite a bit further out. It'll be all the way, make sure that's here, just about there. And so I'm gonna use my ruler and just start to get those in. And it's really a little bit more the way that I would work, and that is to just quickly sketch in what I want in a panel and then draw my perspective based on that. Unfortunately, it can be very difficult if you are really unfamiliar with drawing perspective from your imagination to do that initial step and then use it as a basis for perspective later on. But as soon as we finish this example, I'll show you some really great ways to be able to cheat that. And so I want my desk to be just about here. And again, the way that I did it in the first panel, I'm just gonna sketch this in just to kind of establish where I want things to sit. I want this desk to be pretty narrow because again, I don't want this problem to happen. So more narrow than you're thinking. And I think his desk might just need to be a little bit deeper. Yeah, so let me just adjust that again. Give him some vertical blinds. Maybe I'll give him a cabinet just here. This big tall cabinet. Books. A picture up on the wall just about here. Just throwing things in. And there's my basic office. Really, really simple. Again, very, very loose. And we're just gonna go ahead and slightly tighten this up. And that's gonna do it. There's my guy sitting in an office. Very, very simple. Obviously, this is pretty generic, but the whole point is that this is just quickly establishing a 2-point perspective using a simple sketch, and it's just simple shapes. So just to quickly draw this again, I've got my horizon just about here. So I'm basically drawing blocks in perspective. So there's a block for that. My whole room is a block that I'm really kind of seeing the inside of, just like that. And then everything else is really built on that, just smaller blocks. This is really the traditional way of doing perspective. A couple of really simple shots. Now we're gonna go into 3-point perspective. And I'm gonna tell you that 3-point perspective can be very difficult. And to show you, I'm just gonna sketch these really quickly. So I've got one panel and then 2 panels. I'm gonna draw essentially the same scene. And so I'm gonna be looking up at some buildings, and that means because I'm looking up, I'm very low down. I want my horizon to be pretty low. This would be my eye level. And so I'm just gonna sketch in some simple block shapes. I'm thinking, I'm looking up at a block. I'm gonna draw it like this. And so there's my very simple block shape, and that's in 3-point perspective. And so my perspective that I've drawn is one point would be here, my other point would be here, and then my third point would be up here. I've got a building here, and I'll put another building beside it here, and I can just throw buildings really wherever I want. Maybe another one up here and another one here. And the real challenge of drawing in 3-point perspective is where to put this third point, and it can be a little bit arbitrary. And I'm going to do the same shot, and now I'm going to use basically the same point. So I had one point just about here, the other point was just about here, and I'm going to do the same perspective from the bottom to show you what I mean. Okay, and so now I'm going to draw my point here instead, just a little bit higher, just about here. And so I'm going to draw a building here and another one here, another one up here. Here's another building here. You're looking at the side of it. And another one up here. And so I've got a bunch of buildings drawn. You can see I use the same perspective from the bottom, but I changed the upper point and they both work. And so what's the rule with that? Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't know. And I'm sure there are mathematical ways to figure all this out and big brain stuff. And honestly, it's always really been kind of beyond me and it feels a little bit arbitrary. And I'm gonna tell you the way that I learned how to do this when I was starting. All right, so I've gone ahead and drawn a pretty tech-heavy background. This is just a basic hallway. This is the kind of thing that you'll run into quite a bit drawing comics. And while this is a simple 2-point perspective, I've got one point here and the other point is just about here. It can be very difficult figuring out just exactly how to lay all this out, how to lay out your points and lay out your horizon line in order to get this kind of a shot. And I found, for me, when I was starting out, the easiest way that I had for being able to envision panels like this was to just look at other comics of artists that I really like that did great backgrounds and then just use their perspective. And so in this case, I'm going to show you the panel that I used, and that is this one right here. And so from here to here, and I actually used my pencil just to kind of line those up, I ended up with a point just about here. And my other point, I didn't measure from this panel, but I figured it would just be about there, and I just kind of eyeballed it on my page to make sure that it matched. And then the verticals in this panel are just vertical. It's a simple 2-point perspective. But this gave me a horizon line and a general panel layout that I could then use to put my own background on. So it's a completely different shot, but I used the same perspective. And I used this trick quite a bit when I was trying to get the hang of being able to envision panels on my own, something that is pretty difficult to do. And it's not something that you're really going to get from learning proper perspective from a book. And I'm going to do one more example like this, and we'll zip ahead to when I have it finished, and then I'll show you what I used as my inspiration for my perspective. And by the way, before I forget, the panel that I use for my general perspective layout, my horizon and my points, is from The Authority by Warren Ellis, Brian Hitch, and Paul Neary. Brian Hitch is the artist that did the work, and this is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend any of his work if you're looking for some great examples of some very complex perspective done very, very well. All right, so I've gone ahead and drawn one more example. This is someone sitting at his desk, and I've got a perspective point here and here, so my horizon is above eye level. And it's a 3-point perspective, so my third point is all the way down here. I actually had to tape a piece of paper to this page to be able to rule those out. And in order to get this perspective, I used 2 different images from the same movie. In the first image, we can see a bedroom. There's a woman standing at the window, and the guy, I think it's Philip Seymour Hoffman, is laying on the bed. And I got the perspective from this image here. And the way that I did that, I just eyeballed it. You could, if you really wanted to, print this out and rule it out to do it properly, but I think you should be able to get the angles just visually, but it was fairly easy for me to be able to isolate the points. All I did is check 1 point low and 1 point high in the image, and 1 point left and 1 point right in the image, and then I did the same thing for my third point. Once I had the points, I put in all my perspective, and then I was able to draw this panel on top of it, which is a completely different image than what I was looking at here. But what I used for that, I also used reference, and I drew Philip Seymour Hoffman sitting at his desk in his office. And so I wanted to use that image, but I didn't want to use that perspective. And so using the perspective that I had before, I was able to rearrange all the elements and just put them into this perspective here, which shows you how powerful it is to be able to take the perspective from one image and then insert your own image on top of it and be able to use that. It's a great learning tool. It's something that if you're not comfortable with perspective and how to get all this laid out on the page, you can take it from any image that you find where you think the angle is going to work for you and then put your own elements into that perspective. And it really is how I learned. Okay, so we've covered how you can use other comic books or stills for movies to create your own comic panels, but there are easier ways with technology, and this first one is Sketchup. And so I've just opened a simple file, and it comes with the default character in the center of the screen, and I'll just go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to open up 3D Warehouse. 3D Warehouse is a massive catalog from Sketchup that you can use to search for really just about whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and type in perspective grid and hit enter, and it starts with products for some reason. I'm going to switch to models, and there are quite a few different options. I'm going to load this directly into my SketchUp model and just set it down, and I can hold down my middle mouse button and just rotate around it. And this one actually comes with 2 figures in it, and you can see how this will give you very simple perspective very quickly and easily. I can rotate it to any angle I want. If I want something that's more of a downward shot, I can also, by the way, I can just delete that. If it's getting in the way, I can also delete this wall here, and I can set this up however I like and then use that as my perspective grid. Something else I can do is I can go into camera, I can go into field of view, and then just drag out a much deeper or shallower depth of field. So if I want something that's in very extreme perspective, I can really pull that out. You need to be aware though, you can see these shapes are really starting to distort. You don't want diamond shapes like this forming in your image because it's well beyond what your eye could actually see in real life. So you want to stay within a certain range, and that'll give you the perspective that you need, that you can then go ahead and just print out. Just go to File, and you want to go to Export and export a 2D graphic. And from your 2D graphic, you want to hit Options and make sure to select a decent image size. You can get something that's pretty small otherwise. Just press OK, save it out, and you can use that, size it up however you need it for your panel, and that gives you an automatic perspective that's going to be true and accurate. I do recommend that you find your points manually while you're learning though, because you really don't want to be stunted and only able to draw perspective this way. But this is a really great cheat for you to be able to just get something established very quickly. And you can actually even take this further. I'm going to go ahead and make this an office, and I'm going to select my 3D warehouse and find a desk that we like. Try this one right here. Download directly into my model. I don't really like where it is right now, but I can just quickly move it into place. It's sitting off the ground right now. Drop that down so it's on the ground. And now I've got a desk, and I've got some tools up here. I can go ahead, I can take my rectangle tool, I can just draw it directly onto the wall behind. And then once I have this, I can go ahead and select my offset tool. That's this one right here. And it's very easy for me to just offset a frame in there very, very quickly. And I can use my push and pull and bring that out. Bring this one out just a little bit more, give me a little room there. And so I very quickly created a picture frame or a window or really whatever you need. And let's say I want a garbage can. I'll just select that, determine models, and use this one here. And I can just very quickly place that, turn it so I'm happy with it, and put it directly into my model. I'm sure there's fine. There are limitations, but the nice thing is everything comes with a nice outline, which you can actually make a little bit more convenient just by going to View and go to Face Style and just select Monochrome. And that'll get rid of all the colors and make it much easier for you to use. And then you can print this out, size it the way you want it, and use it to trace to get your background completely how you'd like it. SketchUp also has the advantage of having very easy to use construction tools. So I'm just going to select, here's a rectangle, I'm gonna grab my pencil tool, and it should snap to the center there. That would be the midpoint. And there's a midpoint on the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and raise that up, and that can be a curb. I can select my midpoint again there and bring it across. There's a midpoint there. There's another midpoint here, another one here, and I've got some divisions in my sidewalk. I'm gonna go ahead and select a circle and place that down, extrude that out. I'm gonna grab my selection tool, grab the top of that. And when I have the resize tool selected, if I just hold down Control, I can resize that how I want and bring that in just a little bit, extrude this up. Grab my offset tool. There we go. Grab my extrude tool, and basically there's a light post. And I can really quickly and easily put together all the elements that I need for a scene. I can also go ahead and just select, let's just type in man, and grab something nice and simple. This guy will work. I don't really recommend that you worry about the actual pose. And when you set it down, and before you set it down, it'll be in perspective, but as soon as you set it, it faces toward the camera. And you can see he's quite a bit too large. So I'm just gonna go ahead, grab my scale tool, and I can scale him down to just about there. I think that's probably a good size. And I can quickly populate an entire scene this way. I can select this guy here, and with my move tool, if I hold down Control, I can duplicate him all across the scene. And I can very quickly arrange figures through a scene with proper sizing. One last advantage to SketchUp that I want to show you really quickly is if you need to draw a large round room, that can be just about impossible. But with SketchUp, you can do it pretty quickly and easily. I'm going to use my extrude, bring that up, select the ceiling and just delete that. This can be fairly difficult to use because it's really not giving you all the information you need to be able to establish all of your perspective. The easiest way to solve that is to just go into your select tool, take the top edge, go into your move tool, hold down Control, drag that down, drag it down again. I'm not being accurate, I suppose you could be. There are ways to do this. You can select 10 times and it'll do that, but I'm really not worrying about that. And now I can just go into my view and select hidden geometry, and that'll really give me everything I need to be able to use that to establish perspective in a circle. And so that's SketchUp, and it can bring you pretty far, but there are more advanced options, and I highly recommend that you take a look at DAZ 3D. So what I've done, I've already got a model loaded in here, and this is a hull. I'm not an expert with this program. To be honest, I don't really use these much when I'm working, but you can see that this gives you an incredible level of detail with your model that you can then use for your drawings, and you can establish lighting and do all kinds of things with it. Honestly, that stuff is really beyond me. I really don't have any use for that. You can also adjust your field of view and play with those things the same way that you can in SketchUp. And so I've gone ahead and dragged in a basic female model into my scene and put it at the bottom of the stairs. Let's find something that looks like walking. Here we go. So I'm just going to double click on that, and that should affect my model. And there you go. Now she's walking, but I also can just directly grab individual parts of the model and move her around all the way down to the fingers, which can get a little finicky, but you can do it. I can grab her head, and you can see it pulls the whole rest of the body and get a little crazy. But if you get pretty good with this, you can get just about any pose you want. You can add multiple figures to your scene, and you can really establish any kind of a scene you want. And it can make it very easy for you to create very complex panels for you to use. DAZ 3D has thousands of backgrounds of just about anything you could possibly imagine, all articulatable, multiple different figures. You really could create comics just using this, and I've seen people do it. Sometimes it's really worked well, and sometimes it hasn't. As a basic drawing aid, I think it's very useful, but if it's overused, obviously it can look a little phony. So now what I'm gonna do in order to be able to use this for my comic is I'm gonna go into these are my render. Will just directly render. This will open my render settings. So I've opened that up. So for this, I'm using Scripted 3D Delight, and I'm using that because if I open this just a little bit more, I can go to Render Script, select Render Script, and just select Outline, because that's really what I want from this. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and hit render. And so I've gone into my render library, and I've got a few options to choose from. You can see I've got this option here, and because I didn't really choose any lighting, it's really not very useful to me, but I've got that option. And if you really want to pursue it, you can take that pretty far. But what I really want from this is just my outlines. And you can see that it's given me a very good outline of everything in the scene. And it's not perfect, and it takes a little bit of work, but you can take this, you can lightbox this and very quickly finish this. Or if you're working on the computer, you can use this as an underlayer and even use some of the lines in it. And I'm sure you've seen comics where the backgrounds really have this kind of look. And this is, for the most part, how people pull that off, using computer-generated backgrounds and really not having to draw anything at all. There are a lot of different ways to do this. This is the most simple way that I know. It's not the best. But if you want to just get up and running and find something very, very quick and simple and easy to use, this is not such a bad way to go. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful for you. I didn't want to just do a video on how to draw perspective, showing horizon lines, 1-point perspective, 2-point, and 3-point perspective. There's so many resources like that out there. I wanted to show practically how I learned how to draw perspective, ways that you can grow using photographs and other artists' work, but still keep it your own just by pulling elements that help you, like perspective points and different points of view to help you along. And then also some 3D tools that really take it to the next level, that will have mathematically perfect perspective, but at the expense of really learning how to do it yourself. I think a well-rounded comic artist can really do both. Be sure to tune in every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern for Monday Night Draw with Meredith and Dave, and I will see you in the next video.